Hello and welcome. It has become America's greatest enemy, but 2 decades ago the name Al-Qaeda had no public presence. As it marks the 20th anniversary of its founding, Al-Qaeda has become a movement that's somewhat a different organization. 20 years ago, Osama bin Laden, together with his loyal supporters, created a group with a goal of bringing about regime change in the Middle East, particularly in places such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia. The group, which became named Al-Qaeda, or the base, wanted to create hardline Taliban-style Muslim theocracies in those countries. To do this, Al-Qaeda also targeted supporters of the current Arab leaders there, especially the USA. Well, 10 years ago, Al-Qaeda took responsibility for the bombings of 2 American embassies in Africa, and 3 years on, September the 11th, 2001, they carried out one of the most daring acts of terrorism on US soil. Since then, Al-Qaeda has become the inspiration for insurgent movements everywhere, from Afghanistan to the Philippines to North Africa. Despite the relentless US-led war on terror, the loss of most of its leadership, and a backlash from people who once sympathized with its goals, the Al-Qaeda movement has survived. Well, today we ask, 20 years on, is Al-Qaeda still a global threat? Join in with your questions and comments. Joining me to discuss the issue, I have author and journalist Christopher Hitchens, who believes that a lot of progress has been made in chasing Al-Qaeda out of Iraq. He's joining us from Stanford. From San Francisco is Justin Raimondo, the editorial director of antiwar.com. His view is that Al-Qaeda is coming back in Afghanistan and wasn't much of a presence in Iraq, despite the US administration's claims. And from Boston is Nazar Janabi, a fellow at the Washington Institute, focusing on Iraqi and Middle Eastern security issues and democratization in the region. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. And Nazar Janabi, if I could start with you and ask you if Al-Qaeda can actually be defeated. Is there something that can visibly or clearly be stated as a defeat of Al-Qaeda in any way?
Rez, thank you very much for having me, and absolutely yes. We've seen Al-Qaeda started establishing itself in Iraq in the past few years, and it became a serious threat to Iraq society and to the region. We've seen Al-Qaeda fighters flowing into Iraq. But let me say one thing. The worst enemy of Al-Qaeda is Al-Qaeda itself. Al-Qaeda established itself in the western area of Iraq, and people, Arabs, Sunni, Muslims who live in that region lived under Al-Qaeda's regime, and they recognize that it's a flawed regime. Their arguments are flawed. The atrocities that they committed against the community there defeated Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda itself defeated itself in Iraq. Iraqis, it kind of alienated its base in Iraq, and the end was Iraqi people who are Arab Muslims, so they are the same constituents that Al-Qaeda usually talks to, revolted against Al-Qaeda and kicked Al-Qaeda out of the region.
We had an email, Nazar, I'd like to put you. It came from Sydney in Australia, and if I could ask you to answer this one. It came from S. Anoma, who says, I have no doubt that Al-Qaeda will turn 21 and perhaps even celebrate 40 or 50. Osama bin Laden will not be captured. What sort of future do you feel Al-Qaeda has?
Al-Qaeda has a very dull future, especially in the Arab region and in the Arab-speaking countries. When Al-Qaeda is active in a non-Arab-speaking country, and this is one of the key problems that Al-Qaeda face, or the advantages that Al-Qaeda have in non-Arab-speaking countries, their fatwas, their ideology. People in these areas who cannot speak Arabic have no means of returning to Quran and Sunnah in order to verify fatwas Al-Qaeda issues, and on that fatwa Al-Qaeda kills people, commits all kinds of atrocities. While in an Arab-speaking country, when as they call it, an emir of Al-Qaeda issues a fatwa that ice is haram, people are going to look into Quran and look into Sunnah and say, hey, this is not true. This is absolutely not true.
Let's get on the line.
And this is what defeats Al-Qaeda.
Well, let's get on the line Mehdi, who's in Morocco, with a question. Mehdi, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, I have a question.
Right.
What exactly is Al-Qaeda? Is it a group, or is it an ideology followed by hundreds of people? What exactly is it? Because
Okay.
A lot of people would argue that it's something which is invisible, and it's just some documented ideology followed by a great number of people rather than a group. What is the actual definition
let's put
of
that to
Al-Qaeda?
Justin Raimondo. If you could give us your perception on what Al-Qaeda actually is, please.
Well, Al-Qaeda is our worst nightmare, and apparently it's come true. Look, Al-Qaeda would not even exist if it wasn't for U.S. foreign policy, a foreign policy of relentless aggression throughout the Middle East ever since the 1940s. We've overthrown countries, we've rampaged throughout the region, and Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden would be fringe characters who would have no following if not for the actions of U.S. foreign policy. So actually, our worst enemy is not Al-Qaeda, it is ourselves.
Okay, well, I guess perhaps that means, Justin, you see it more as an ideology or philosophy that has a strong anti-American slant to it.
Well, I mean, Al-Qaeda is blowback. Al-Qaeda is the echo of our own atrocities. So, you know, I don't think it's an organization, and all this nonsense about Al-Qaeda in Iraq. I mean, how much of a base did they really have in Iraq until we invaded Iraq? They weren't even there. So, you know, it seems like a lot of nonsense.
Hey, Christopher, it's good to have you back on the show. And just a quick question as you give your view on this. Let me also ask you.
Ask me.
Yeah, pleasure. Let's get also your view on some contradictions that some people see in the way America describes its sort of battle against Al-Qaeda. Just a few months ago, the CIA director, Michael Hayden, was saying that Al-Qaeda was much weaker. It had been nearly defeated strategically in Iraq and in Afghanistan and, in Saudi Arabia, and had significant setbacks. How do you regard the position and the strength of Al-Qaeda 20 years on?
Well, I'm not sure I would take the CIA's word for this, or on anything, as a matter of fact, but the evidence from Iraqi witnesses, very believable, chiefly Sunni Arab Muslim local figures, is that Al-Qaeda has been repudiated in overwhelming degrees by the population that it claimed to be speaking for. Just look no further than what happens in Baghdad yesterday. The Abu Hanifa Mosque, a very fine old Sunni mosque in the Adamir quarter, blown up at prayer time. We don't yet know the number of casualties. The evident target was a member of the local Sunni Awakening forces who, I regret to say, was killed. But that's not just the only thing that shows that what nonsense Mr. Raimondo has been talking. You'd have to ask the citizens of India and of the Philippines, two large and relatively thriving Asian democracies who had their own differences with the American empire in their time, always targeted by Al-Qaeda with secessionist movements that want to wrench great chunks of their territory away and convert them into, as you correctly described in your introduction, Taliban-style theocracies. The Taliban takeover of the people of Afghanistan, taking advantage of the post-Soviet civil war, isn't the result of American imperialism in the region. It is the result of a well-thought-out campaign by certain extreme Wahhabis who practice a horrible cult, they call it takfir, excommunicating anyone who doesn't agree with them and saying they can be killed in the name of God, as these Sunni Muslim Arabs were yesterday in Baghdad. Until it's understood that this is a hideous challenge to all the decencies of Arab and Muslim society and can't be blamed on the innumerable errors of American foreign policy, you don't have a chance of analyzing it properly.
Let's get a response from Justin Raimondo on this, on what Christopher Hitchens was saying.
Well, it's well known that Al-Qaeda was financed, supported by the U.S. during the Soviet-Afghan war. So, I mean, who built all those underground chambers? And it's well known to everyone, Christopher, as you well know. It's nonsense. We supported the Afghan Mujahideen, and now it's blowback. It's coming at us. It's just like a Frankenstein
monster.
Alliance.
The Northern Alliance was America's favorite Afghan movement, and the Northern Alliance fought the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and was telling us before September 11th, don't be deceived. These people really...
And now we are supporting the Northern Alliance
what they've done,
against the Taliban.
Yes,
okay, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Oh, nonsense. The same Soviet people, they were pro-Soviet.
Gentlemen, let me just do one thing. Let me get Nazar Janabi in here and ask, looking at what Al-Qaeda has, what it's achieved in 20 years, who is joining Al-Qaeda now, Mr. Janabi? Who's Al-Qaeda recruiting nowadays?
Al-Qaeda will always have recruits, and this this is something that that's
why is
going to
that?
happen. There will always be injustice in the world, and out of the hundreds of millions of Muslims, Al-Qaeda will always be able to find a handful of people who are unhappy, who have been subject to injustice, and this is something that is going to persist. Okay. The whole idea is that Al-Qaeda's ideology had collapsed.
Well,
excuse me?
Go ahead, Christopher.
To what injustice was Muhammad Atta ever subjected? To what injustice was Mr. bin Laden subjected? Don't you notice that when the Al-Qaeda forces in Indonesia put bombs in Bali, they bring down the national income by a full point in just one week? They're not the product of poverty and unemployment. They are the cause of it. Okay. They're the cause of injustice.
Let's do one thing. Let's get Muhammad.
They want to throw acid in the faces of women. Is this justice?
Injustice never existed until Al-Qaeda, right?
Gentlemen, let's just wait a second. We've got Mohammed on the line from Maryland. Let's get our viewers a chance to ask a question or make a comment. Mohammed in Maryland, what would you like to say?
Yes, my question is, I mean, the same group which was fighting in Afghanistan for 7 to 9 years, I never heard about this group as Al-Qaeda. The moment 9/11 happened, then everywhere I heard Al-Qaeda. One thing. Second, whatever action Al-Qaeda, so-called Al-Qaeda, they committed on 9/11, exactly similar action George Bush did in Afghanistan and killed hundreds and thousands of people with thousands and billions of dollars of property destruction. What is the difference?
Okay.
Both actions are the same. Why George Bush should not be penalized for the same thing?
Okay, Mohammed, thank you for your comment from Maryland. Now, gentlemen, we're going to touch more on this in a moment. We have to pause for a break here, but there's more on our discussion about Al-Qaeda when we come back. Welcome back. We're looking at Al-Qaeda 20 years after its founding. What sort of global threat does it present and what is its future? For the discussion, we're joined by author and journalist Christopher Hitchens, who's in Stanford. From San Francisco, Justin Raimondo, the editorial director of antiwar.com, and from Boston, Nazar Janabi of the Washington Institute. Let's get back to our discussion with a call from Arya in Washington. What would you like to say, Arya?
Thank you for good programming. My question is, if 5+1 are serious about getting rid of Al-Qaeda, don't you guys think we should, they should help Iranian to get rid of this regime, fanatic, cleric regime in Iran, and that would make it much easier to get rid of the Al-Qaeda and other, because right now Iran with with all that we have in the world and the price of oil being so high, they got all kind of money to support this terrorism.
Arya, let's see. Justin Raimondo, do you feel Iran has anything to contribute in this equation in trying to fight Al-Qaeda?
Well, I don't think they're in the mood to fight our enemies, since we keep threatening them, threatening to invade them, threatening to obliterate them. So I don't think they're really going to be in the mood to help us. Though maybe if Obama gets in, they might.
Although what the caller was saying, Justin, is that perhaps by changing the regime in Iran, it might have an impact on the future of Al-Qaeda. It might actually help to get rid of Al-Qaeda.
Well, it's interesting how, people think that we can just change regimes and go around the world and change this regime and change that regime just like we're gods. Well, you know what? We're not gods. And the thing is that we keep acting like we are, which is why Al-Qaeda is now celebrating its 20th anniversary today and is not extinct. It's outrageous.
Could I make an observation? Could I make an observation about this?
Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead, Christopher.
Sure.
It was actually the Clinton administration, if you remember, a little while ago, about 10 years ago, actually intervened to stop the Iranians from carrying out their threat to invade Afghanistan to remove the Taliban. In other words, the questioner is making a very interesting point. If you may remember, because the Taliban had been massacring the Hazara, the ethnically Persian and mainly Shia population of Afghanistan, the Iranians sent a delegation to Mazar-al-Sharif of their diplomats, who were arrested by the Taliban and publicly executed. It was a famous occasion. The Iranians moved their armor up to the Afghan border. The United States, in that case, prevented an invasion of a Muslim country by another one. Since that time, it's true, some Al-Qaeda people on the run have taken refuge in Iran and may even be, in some sense, said to be sheltered by them, but it's not going to be forgotten by anyone in Persia that Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia in particular is a highly sectarian organization that regards Shia as heretics who can be slaughtered at any time in the name of God.
Rita's on the line for me.
That's the sort of injustice, to borrow a phrase from Mr. Raimondo, that never seems to come onto the screen of antiwar.com. Al-Qaeda blew up the UN
office in Baghdad. Well, it wasn't my phrase, Christopher. It was a question.
Al-Qaeda.
Okay, gentlemen, listen, we have Rita on the line from Egypt.
Al-Qaeda blew up the UN headquarters in Baghdad because the UN envoy, Sergio de Mello, had been responsible for the independence of East Timor. They were protesting against that piece of justice and liberation, which they regarded as un-Islamic.
All right, let's get Rita on the line from
Egypt.
Up against. Egypt's on the line with a question or comment. Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, I want to know now that Musharraf, the people of Pakistan are now pushing Musharraf out of power, what is the American doing about that? Because the Americans are not there to support Musharraf. Because some years back, they wanted Musharraf to help them to fight Al-Qaeda. And today, none of them is there to support Musharraf. Why is it so?
Nazar Janabi, what impact do you think this change in Pakistan might have on Al-Qaeda's future, especially as many of the Al-Qaeda sort of key figures are said to be there?
Well, the change that happened in Pakistan it's a normal change. We can't expect a leader who was supported by the United States or by whoever in a democratic country to remain to remain forever. This change was based on an election that happened in Pakistan, and the new government. I'm not sure it's gonna change course or be supportive of Al-Qaeda or Taliban. On the contrary, as I see, they'll continue to try to undermine Al-Qaeda's presence in their region and try to influence Al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan.
Christopher, how do you rate the way life or quality of life has changed around the world, particularly in places like the United States, where a lot of civil liberties and freedoms seem to have diminished in response to this so-called war on terror? Al-Qaeda seems to have made quite a big mark in the way we all lead our lives nowadays.
Surely. I mean, I had to take part as an individual in a lawsuit. I'm a named plaintiff in a lawsuit in the United States against the administration, sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union, on the wiretapping case, for example. And I've written quite a lot about undergoing the experience of waterboarding, which I regard as quite self-evidently crossing the line of that constitutes torture. And it's been very depressing to see how panicked and stampeded some democracies have been in the face of this vicious jihadist organization. One of the many reasons I'm against these kinds of response, phone tapping, waterboarding and so forth, as well as being against them in principle, is this. As the Iraqi people have so bravely demonstrated, Al-Qaeda doesn't have a chance in hell of ever winning the hearts and minds of an Arab Muslim society in a fair fight. They repudiate it on their own. Al-Qaeda's defeat is certain. It's inscribed in its own mad program and its own cruel and sadistic and suicidal, literally suicidal, actions. So we have no right to throw away our ancient liberties. All we need is to be very patient and very intelligent and, of course, very ruthless.
Justin Raimondo, what would you propose as actions, steps to take against Al-Qaeda the way it is now that might have an impact on at least improving the quality of life for the majority of people and making a dent in Al-Qaeda's influence?
Well, if I knew that, maybe I'd be head of the FBI. Though it seems to me that Al-Qaeda...
You advocate withdrawal and surrender.
Excuse me, Christopher.
Sorry, Christopher.
I read your site. You advocate withdrawal and surrender, and you make excuses that say Al-Qaeda is the product of injustice.
Well, let Justin have his...
You carry their water for them.
Let Justin have his say in what he would suggest.
This is a great literature.
Sure. He already has said his say.
Christopher Hitchens.
Thank you. Let's
a well-known liberator.
Let's get a call on the line. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Rosette's on the line from London. Rosette, what would you like to add?
Yes, this is. Yes, my name is Rafat, and I wanted to comment about these two speakers, Christopher Hitchens and the other person from San Francisco. I just heard the person from San Francisco, indirectly supporting Al-Qaeda and saying that the Northern Alliance was a pro-Soviet sort of movement. I'm from Afghanistan, and I would like to say, confirm what Christopher Hitchens said, that Al-Qaeda not only massacred thousands and thousands of Shia Muslims, but also religious Sunni Muslims. You know, the best example was Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was the most successful commander against the Soviet Union. Yeah. And then they assassinated him as well. You know, for Afghans, if you live under Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, you realize what a brutal force it is.
Right.
You know, it's very easy to speak from some
Rasid, let me put this. That's true, Christopher. One of the main issues that people get confused about what Al-Qaeda is about nowadays, because it seems like almost everyone could be an enemy of Al-Qaeda. Isn't that the case?
Well, there's no reason for anyone except a fanatic to be anything but an enemy of it. No.
In terms of, I mean, what our caller was saying about, you know,
look
the targets.
I mean, if you wonder what they might do to our society, look at what they've done to Muslim societies. Look how they reduced Afghanistan to complete peonage and slavery. Look at the way that 50% of the population of the Muslim world, the female part, is considered subhuman. For example, look at the damage they've done to the economy and society of Algeria during the period of Takfiri so-called insurgency. It wasn't an insurgency, it was a criminal gangster attempt to destroy Algerian society. It was defeated by the Algerian people themselves.
So it's going to be very
once again,
as they will be defeated in
people like Christopher
as they will be
Hitchens,
defeated in Iraq,
who are waging war on the entire world.
Well, gentlemen, listen, gentlemen.
The Algerian FLN doesn't meet that. The Algerian FLN doesn't.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, but we've run out of time and we hit our out point here. But thank you very much for taking part with this. Thanks very much, gentlemen.